Hey guys, tonight we're going to wander through a world that feels both impossibly distant and oddly familiar. The bustling, sun-baked streets of ancient Egypt. You can almost hear it now, can't you? The low hum of voices bargaining over spices and fabrics, the bray of donkeys hauling baskets, and the sharp clang of metal as craftsmen hammer away in tiny shops. The air is thick with the mingled scent of fresh bread, incense, and something a bit less pleasant. Let's just say sanitation wasn't exactly a priority here. Tonight's story is all about something that sounds hilariously mundane, but is strangely fascinating. Shopping lists. Yes, those scribbled little notes you stick on your fridge or tap into your phone. Except the ancient Egyptians didn't have paper or phones. Instead, they wrote their grocery lists on broken pieces of pottery. And trust me, their lives weren't any easier than yours. In fact, if you were to step into their world, you probably wouldn't survive a day. Between the heat, the back-breaking labour, and the complete lack of sunscreen, unless you count the fish oil and crocodile dung concoction they called protection, you'd be begging for modern comforts within minutes. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is right now. I love seeing where these sleepy little journeys are reaching people. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself weaving through narrow alleys, worn smooth by countless feet before yours. The walls around you tower like sandstone canyons, painted with faded hieroglyphs and streaked by centuries of desert wind. You squint up at the sky, a pale, unrelenting sheet of white-blue heat, and then duck beneath a linen awning for some blessed shade. In front of you stretches the sprawling market of Thebes, pulsing with life and colour. Merchants sit cross-legged behind heaps of onions, dates, and dried fish. Their voices rise and fall like a river of sound, chanting prices and praising their goods. You catch snatches of conversation as you wander past, arguments about the quality of beer, gossip about a neighbour's daughter who ran off with a scribe, and one particularly heated debate over whether dried figs or honey cakes make a better festival offering. Honestly, it's not so different from listening to modern folks argue about pumpkin spice. And there, in the midst of it all, you spot them, people clutching bits of broken pottery in their hands, squinting at the black scribbles etched onto the surfaces. They aren't holding them like delicate antiques, though. No, they're using them. Actively. These shards, called ostraka, are their to-do lists, their receipts, even their text messages in a sense. You pause to watch as a woman in a simple linen dress hands her pottery shard to the spice vendor. He squints at it, nods, then scoops a small heap of cumin seeds into a cloth pouch. She tucks the shard back into her woven basket, alongside a few onions and a jug of oil, then moves on without missing a step. It's almost funny, this bustling ancient city, brimming with incense and towering statues of gods. Yet here they are, walking around with grocery lists scribbled on trash. And as you keep walking, you can't help but wonder how this started. Why pottery? Why not papyrus, that famous Egyptian invention you've seen in every museum? The answer, of course, is quite practical. Papyrus was expensive, reserved for sacred texts, government decrees, and formal letters. Ordinary people couldn't afford to waste it on shopping lists or reminders. But pottery? Well, there was always plenty of that lying around. You glance down at the street beneath your feet, littered with discarded shards, some sharp, some smooth by time. The city churns through pottery like a modern city goes through coffee cups and plastic bags. Pots break, plates chip, bowls crack. And when they do, the pieces don't go to waste. They're picked up, wiped clean, and turned into notepads. It makes you think, doesn't it? Imagine if every broken dish or shattered mug in your kitchen became a sticky note. Suddenly your kitchen junk drawer would be a library. As you walk further, you spot a young boy sitting cross-legged near a pottery stall. He holds a broken bowl and carefully dips his reed pen into a pot of black ink, his tongue sticking out in concentration as he copies neat, deliberate characters onto the surface. A school assignment, maybe? Or perhaps he's jotting down a recipe his mother recited earlier. Either way, the scene is oddly charming. You notice how the boy's fingers are stained with ink, and there's a tiny smudge on his cheek. His father, a stout man selling amphorae, glances over with a fond smile before turning back to his customers. It's a small, quiet moment, but you can't help but be drawn to it. The timelessness of it all. The boy could be anyone, from any era, scribbling away while the world moves around him. But here's the thing. Historians still argue about whether ostraca were simply disposable or if they held deeper cultural significance. Were they meant to be tossed after use, or did some people treasure certain pieces, preserving them as keepsakes? You take another look round the bustling market, watching as hands pass shards back and forth. Some with lists, others with sketches, a few with names and dates, each one a fragment of a larger story, forgotten by time but still lingering, waiting for someone like you to notice. And as you continue through the winding streets of ancient Thebes, one thing becomes clear. In this world of sun and stone, even the broken things had their place. You keep moving through the market, your sandals scuffing softly against the dusty ground. The further you wander, the more you start noticing these little shards everywhere, propped on vendor tables, slipped into woven baskets, even tucked into belts like miniature clipboards. It's oddly comforting in a way. No scrolls or tablets here, just fragments of everyday life, written down on what was once a cooking pot or a shattered amphora. Eventually you duck into a quieter alley, away from the lively noise of the market. The street here narrows, the buildings lean closer together, and the air grows thick with the scent of baking bread and something a bit sharper. You realize you've stumbled into the neighborhood of scribes and artisans, the people responsible for all these fascinating little records. At the corner of the alley, you spot a man hunched over a low wooden bench, carefully painting black ink onto a jagged pottery shard. His hands are steady, his brush strokes precise, and there's a focused furrow in his brow. He's not writing poetry or spells, he's jotting down a simple order: 5 loaves of barley bread, 2 jars of beer, and a sack of onions. Dinner plans, essentially. You pause to watch him work, mesmerized by the deliberate way his hand glides across the rough surface. You can almost hear the soft scratch of the brush against the clay, feel the texture under your fingertips. The ink shimmers faintly in the sunlight as it dries. The scribe glances up and gives you a small, knowing smile, as if to say, "Yes, this is just how things are done here." He picks up another shard and begins writing again, this time recording a debt owed by a neighbour, 2 goats and a measure of wheat, due by the next full moon. You can't help but chuckle softly at how some things never change. People have been borrowing from each other and grumbling about repayment since time began. And then it clicks. These ostraca aren't just grocery lists. They're snapshots of daily life, little time capsules that capture everything from household errands to simmering neighborhood dramas. Some are as boring as you'd expect: shopping lists, tax records, inventories. But others? Well, they can be surprisingly juicy. You spot another scribe nearby, an older woman with silver streaks in her hair, sorting through a stack of shards. She plucks one from the pile and reads aloud, her voice soft and amused. To the brewer I return 2 empty jars and request 3 new ones, filled this time. She laughs, shaking her head. Always with the beer. You can't help but imagine her as the ancient equivalent of a nosy neighbour scrolling through social media, keeping tabs on everyone's business through these discarded notes. But the most surprising thing about these ostraca isn't what's written on them, it's how common they are. You start to realise that nearly everyone uses them. Farmers, bakers, weavers, priests, even children learning their letters. They're the scrap paper of the ancient world, the junk mail, the receipts crammed into the bottom of every basket. And yet, despite their humble status, they've survived for thousands of years, scattered like breadcrumbs across the sands of time. You start to wonder just how many secrets still lie hidden in the ruins, waiting to be uncovered by some curious archaeologist, or perhaps by you, in another midnight journey like this one. As you wander deeper into the artisan district, you pass a workshop filled with stacks of broken pottery. The air is thick with the scent of wet clay and burning charcoal. A potter sits at the wheel, shaping a vessel with practiced ease, while his apprentice gathers up discarded shards from a nearby pile. The apprentice holds one up to the light, turning it this way and that. You can see the wheels turning in his head. This piece will make a perfect surface for writing. He tucks it under his arm, already planning what he'll scribble later. It's a simple, efficient system. Nothing is wasted. The pots that break in firing become writing tablets. The shards that pile up in homes and markets become to-do lists, letters, and IOUs. You get the feeling the ancient Egyptians would have been excellent recyclers in the modern world. And here's a little twist for you. Some ostraca weren't just used once and discarded. In some cases, people wrote on them over and over, layering new messages atop old ones until the surface was crowded with overlapping text. Talk about getting your money's worth. Scholars still debate whether these were simply practical reuses, or if some held personal or ceremonial value. Some argue that certain messages were preserved intentionally, meant to last as a reminder or keepsake. You pause to run your fingers over a nearby shard, imagining the countless hands that have held it before you. It's humbling, really. A broken bit of pottery that's outlasted entire civilizations, still carrying its quiet message through the ages. And just as you're about to move on, you catch sight of a final detail, a faint drawing etched into the corner of one shard. It's a rough sketch of a cat, curled up in sleep, its tail flicked lazily over its paws. Even in a world of gods and pharaohs, some things never change. You smile to yourself, slipping back into the flow of the streets, ready to see what other little wonders this city has to offer. You drift away from the potter's district, weaving back into the livelier arteries of the city, the streets buzzing with the familiar clatter of sandals and bartering voices. Your attention keeps getting pulled back to those pottery shards, everywhere, tucked into belts, stuffed into satchels, even dangling from cords around the necks of a few especially forgetful shoppers. They're like the ancient Egyptian version of sticky notes, only sharper and a bit more dangerous if you trip and fall on one. Soon you find yourself standing at the entrance of a modest little shop that smells faintly of honey and smoke. It's a bakery, its doorway framed by baskets of round golden loaves, their surfaces scored with neat geometric patterns. The baker, a wiry man with flour-dusted hands and a sun-darkened face, is busy tallying orders. He doesn't use papyrus, of course. No, resting on the ledge beside him is a stack of familiar pottery shards, each inscribed with neat columns of numbers and names. You watch him work, his reed pen darting over the rough surfaces as he notes who's paid for their bread and who still owes a few copper deben. Every now and then he mutters under his breath, clearly unimpressed with some of his customers' promptness. One shard in particular catches your eye. It's marked with a list of bread orders, but there's a little doodle next to one name, a crude sketch of a man with exaggerated ears and a long pointed nose. The baker follows your gaze and chuckles softly. "That one," he says with a grin, "always tries to haggle for an extra loaf." You can't help but laugh. It's comforting to know that even in the shadow of towering temples and ancient gods, some things remain hilariously familiar. Bad customers, passive-aggressive doodles, and grumpy bakers. Timeless, really. But beyond the humour, there's something ingenious about this system. The bakery isn't just a place to buy bread, it's a record-keeping hub. These ostraka serve as proof of purchase, IOUs and ledgers, all rolled into one. And because they're made of discarded pottery, there's no shortage of supply. As you watch, another customer arrives, a stout woman with a stern expression and a basket brimming with onions. She hands the baker a shard, and he nods, producing a bundle of fresh loaves in exchange. He then picks up his pen and adds a quick note to her shard before returning it, like a receipt you're expected to reuse. You follow the woman as she leaves, curiosity pulling you along. She makes her way down a narrow street, stopping at another stall to trade her bread for dried fish. Once again, the mounds of broken pottery catch your eye, each one scribbled with quick utilitarian notes. You begin to see it everywhere now, the flow of goods, tracked and traced by shards of pottery. Bread for fish, fish for wine, wine for oil. It's a barter economy, sure, but one meticulously documented on these unassuming little fragments. And here's the kicker. Historians still debate just how widespread this system was. Some argue that it was limited to urban centres, where pottery waste was abundant and literacy more common. Others believe it extended deep into the countryside, a quiet revolution of recycled record-keeping that slipped under the radar. You can almost hear their debates echoing through time. Were these ostraca mere scraps tossed aside after a few days? Or were they cherished records, stored in household nooks and temple archives, waiting for future generations to rediscover them? You duck into another stall, this one selling oils and spices. The merchant, a sharp-eyed older man, greets you with a nod before returning to his task, grinding cumin seeds while balancing a shard of pottery on his knee, his thumb holding it steady as he reads a recipe scrawled in hasty looping script. The recipe lists familiar ingredients: barley, onions, garlic, but also some more exotic additions: lotus root, coriander, and a generous splash of date wine. The instructions are brief but precise, likely intended for someone who already knows their way around a kitchen. You smile, imagining this merchant's ancient equivalent of a favourite cookbook, except his pages are jagged and sharp-edged, each one a discarded relic turned culinary guide. As the merchant packs a jar of oil for a waiting customer, he glances up at you and offers a wry comment. "The hardest part isn't the cooking, it's remembering where I left the shard." He gestures to a chaotic pile of pottery pieces, each one covered in recipes, debts, and shopping lists. It's easy to lose track when they all start to look the same. You chuckle, unable to resist teasing him. "Maybe you need a filing system." He laughs heartily. "Ah, if only the gods had invented cupboards for such things." As you step back into the sunlight, you can't help but marvel at it all. In a world where most people think of ancient Egypt as a land of towering pyramids and solemn statues, here you are, surrounded by a different kind of monument, one made not of stone, but of clay, ink, and everyday lives. And you realize something else too. these ostraca aren't just about practicality. They're about connection. Between neighbours, between tradespeople, between families. Every shard you pass carries a little piece of that web, linking people across space and time in ways no grand temple inscription ever could. You continue walking, your eyes now trained to spot the familiar gleam of pottery shards tucked into every corner. They're everywhere, whispering stories just beneath the surface, waiting for curious souls like yours to listen. And deep down, you can't shake the feeling that somewhere out there, in another sunlit alley, another scribe is jotting down a note on a shard, unknowingly creating a tiny time machine for someone like you to discover someday. You keep wandering through the winding streets, your steps slow and deliberate, almost as if you're afraid of missing a single detail. The sun has shifted just a bit, casting longer shadows along the sandstone walls, and you find yourself drawn toward a small bakery tucked between two larger shops. The scent of honey and roasted grains drifts toward you, luring you in like some ancient siren's song. Inside, it's warm and dim, lit only by the soft glow of a clay oil lamp hanging from a beam. The baker is a stout man with thick arms and a face creased from years of smiling, or maybe from scowling at customers who don't pay on time. He's hunched over a low table, surrounded by stacks of pottery shards. You watch as he lifts one from the pile, squinting at the faded black lines scrawled across its surface. He mutters under his breath, then carefully wraps a bundle of flatbreads in cloth, setting it aside with a grunt of satisfaction. Another satisfied customer, paid in full, well, according to his shard anyway. The baker glances up and catches your eye, his expression somewhere between amusement and curiosity. "You look like someone who's never seen a proper order system," he says, his voice rough but friendly. Without waiting for a reply, he gestures for you to come closer. You do, leaning in as he holds out one of the shards. The writing is surprisingly neat, with crisp lines that curve gracefully along the pottery's uneven surface. The list is simple enough: bread, onions, beer. But there's something almost elegant about the way it's written, as if the act of recording it carried its own quiet dignity. The baker chuckles softly. "This one's from the temple kitchens," he explains. "They order more bread than anyone else in the district. Always feasts, ceremonies, offerings. It never ends." You raise an eyebrow, imagining priests in flowing linen robes, hunched over clay shards, scribbling down grocery orders between prayers and rituals. It's not quite the image most people have of ancient Egypt, but somehow it fits perfectly. He hands you another shard, this one more worn and chipped at the edges. The writing here is sloppier, rushed and uneven, but still legible. "And this one," the baker adds with a grin, "is from a fisherman down by the docks. Always asking for bread and beer, never anything else. I think he might be part fish by now." You laugh, the image of a half-fish, half-man fisherman stumbling through the streets with a belly full of bread and beer playing out in your mind. But there's something else too, something quieter, more touching. These shards aren't just lists or records, they're fragments of lives, little glimpses into the rhythms of a world long gone, but not forgotten. You notice another pile of shards nearby, smaller and more carefully arranged. The baker's expression softens as he sees you looking. "Those," he says, "are my father's." He picks up one of the shards, cradling it gently in his flour-dusted hands. He was a baker too, wrote everything down, recipes, customer names, debts, even little notes for my mother. He turns the shard over, revealing a simple sketch on the back, a pair of intertwined reeds drawn with a few quick strokes. "That was his mark," the baker says quietly. "He used it to sign his orders. Everyone knew it." There's a warmth in his voice, a quiet pride that makes you smile. It's a reminder that behind every shard, every scribbled list, there's a person, someone with hopes, worries, and a deep need to remember. You hand the shard back, and the baker sets it down with care before returning to his work. As he kneads dough and stirs pots of honeyed grain, he continues to jot notes on shards, slipping them into a basket by the door for later delivery. Watching him, you can't help but feel a strange sense of comfort. It's easy to imagine this scene playing out over and over again, day after day, year after year. A simple, steady rhythm of life, preserved in clay and ink. And here's something to ponder. Scholars still argue about the deeper meaning of these ostraca. Were they simply tools of necessity, discarded once their purpose was served? Or did they hold a more lasting significance, kept and cherished as mementos of daily life? You leave the bakery with a faint smile, your hands empty but your mind full of questions. The streets feel different now, quieter somehow, as if the city itself is settling in for the evening. As you walk, you notice a small shrine tucked into a corner, its walls adorned with faded images of gods and goddesses. Offerings of bread and beer sit at the base, alongside a few tiny pottery shards covered in writing. You lean closer, squinting at the inscriptions. They're prayers. Simple, heartfelt pleas for health, prosperity, and safe journeys. Some are neat and precise, others hurried and barely legible, but all carry the same quiet hope. It hits you then with a soft, steady certainty. In this city of stone and sand, everything is recorded. Every debt, every meal, every whispered wish is captured in clay, waiting for someone like you to stumble upon it. And as you continue your walk through the gathering dusk, the city feels more alive than ever, its stories etched in every corner, waiting to be heard. The streets begin to thin as you wander farther from the bustling market, leaving behind the scent of baking bread and sizzling spices. The air grows quieter, save for the occasional murmur of distant conversations or the soft clatter of pottery being handled behind closed doors. You follow the winding path toward a modest workshop nestled at the edge of the artisan quarter, drawn by the rhythmic tapping of clay being shaped. Inside, the air is thick with the earthy smell of wet clay and charcoal fires. The potter's wheel spins lazily, coaxing a shapeless lump into something more refined. The potter, a lean man with broad shoulders and arms streaked in dried mud, barely glances up as you enter. He's focused, his hands working with the ease of someone who's done this 1,000 times before. But what draws your eye isn't the graceful dance of his fingers on the clay. It's the pile of broken pots stacked in the corner of the room, glinting faintly in the low light. He notices your gaze and lets out a low chuckle, wiping his brow with the back of his hand. "Ah, those," he says, his voice gravelly yet warm. "The most useful things I've ever made, it seems." He gestures toward the shards with a wry smile. "You'd think a broken pot would be worthless, wouldn't you? But here in Thebes, they're worth their weight in ink." He picks up one of the fragments, a curved piece from what must have once been a storage jar, and runs his thumb over the smooth, cool surface. This one's seen 3 lives already. First, it held grain. Then it is cracked and used to patch a roof during a storm. Now it's a tablet for some merchant's debts. You watch as he dips a thin reed pen into a small jar of black ink and scribbles a few quick notes on the shard, testing its surface. The ink glides on easily, dark and sharp against the pale clay. "It's almost funny," he says, setting the shard aside. "I spend hours shaping these pots, perfecting their curves, firing them just right. And yet in the end, it's their broken pieces that last the longest." You smile at the irony. imagining future archaeologists carefully studying these discarded scraps, piecing together stories from fragments no one thought to save. As he continues shaping a new vessel, he tells you more about the practice. When a pot breaks, we don't mourn it, we celebrate it. It means we've made room for something new. Besides, he adds with a grin, it's not like we're short on clay around here. He gestures toward the river beyond the workshop, where the banks are rich with deposits of fine, silty clay, nature's endless supply, waiting to be moulded again and again. And here's something curious. Scholars still debate whether the widespread use of ostraca was driven purely by necessity, or if there was a deeper cultural value in repurposing these fragments. Some believe it was simply practical. Why waste good papyrus on something temporary? Others argue that the practice reflected a philosophy of resourcefulness, a belief that even broken things have purpose. You glance around the workshop, taking in the shelves lined with half-finished pots, the tools scattered across the workbench, the fire crackling softly in the corner. Everything here seems to hum with quiet utility, every object serving its place in the grand rhythm of daily life. The potter sets aside the vessel he's been working on and begins sorting through the pile of shards again, his fingers moving with surprising tenderness for such rough materials. He picks out a particularly large piece, its edges smoothed from use, and holds it up to the light. "This one," he says softly, "came from my grandfather's kiln. It's been in my family for generations. My father wrote his first trade record on it when he was just a boy." He passes it to you, and you feel the weight of it in your hands, light yet dense with history. The writing is faded but still legible, the lines curling around the curve of the fragment like a secret message from the past. You trace the characters with your fingertip, marveling at how something so small could carry so much time within it. The potter watches you, his expression thoughtful. "It's strange, isn't it?" he muses. "How something broken can carry a story longer than anything whole." He chuckles, the sound low and warm. "Maybe that's just how life works. We all break, one way or another. But it's what we do with the pieces that matters." You sit with that thought for a moment, letting it settle over you like a soft blanket. There's something comforting in it, something reassuring. The idea that even in a world of constant change, of crumbling empires and shifting sands, some fragments endure. As you leave the workshop, the potter waves you off with a grin. "Careful where you step," he calls after you, half teasing. You never know which shard you'll trip over, and which one will end up telling your story. You smile as you walk back into the sunlit streets, your mind swirling with images of broken pots, worn hands, and words etched in clay. And somewhere in the back of your mind, you wonder, if your life were written on a shard, what would it say? You wander deeper into the heart of the city, your footsteps slow and steady, drawn by the pull of curiosity. The streets grow quieter here, tucked away from the bustling market and noisy workshops. The air feels different, still warm, but laced with a faint dryness, as if this part of Thebes holds its breath, guarding something precious. Before long you find yourself standing before a narrow doorway, half hidden behind a curtain of woven reeds. A soft voice calls out from within, inviting you to enter. You push aside the curtain and step into a cool, dim space that smells faintly of ink and old clay. You've stumbled into what feels like a treasury, but not of gold or jewels. No, here the shelves are stacked from floor to ceiling with nothing but pottery shards. They fill every corner, every basket, every table. It's as if you've walked into a library, except every book here is chipped and jagged. A figure appears from behind a towering stack of fragments. She's an elderly woman, her linen robe softly rustling as she moves, her hair pulled back into a braid streaked with silver. Her eyes are sharp, lively, and filled with the quiet amusement of someone who's spent a lifetime uncovering secrets. She greets you with a knowing smile, gesturing for you to look around. "This," she says, her voice low and steady, "is the memory of the city." You step further in, your fingers grazing the edges of the countless shards, each one inscribed with the familiar dark ink of ancient hands. It's overwhelming, the sheer weight of it all, the density of forgotten lives pressed into every corner. She watches you closely, then picks up a shard from a nearby basket, turning it over in her hands. "This one," she says, "belonged to a merchant's wife. She recorded every transaction her husband made for 3 decades, every trade, every debt, every festival purchase. She holds it out to you and you take it carefully, feeling the faint ridges of the script beneath your fingertips. The writing curls around the fragment like ivy, delicate yet determined." "She wasn't a scribe," the woman adds with a soft chuckle. "She wasn't even formally trained. But she wrote anyway, because she knew that memory fades, but ink on clay, well, that lasts." You can't help but admire the determination it must have taken to write day after day, year after year, not for glory or fame, but simply to remember. You glance around the room again, realizing that this isn't just a storage space. It's an archive, a carefully curated collection of memories preserved in clay. The woman continues her work as you explore, occasionally pausing to explain a particularly intriguing shard. One bears the records of a baker's sales during a particularly harsh flood season. Another lists temple offerings made during an unusually hot summer when drought threatened the crops. You're struck by how ordinary most of it is, not grand declarations or royal decrees, just simple everyday records of people trying to survive, to thrive, to make sense of their lives. And yet within those mundane details, you begin to see something extraordinary. Patterns emerge, cycles of feast and famine, rhythms of trade and travel, echoes of long-forgotten festivals and family gatherings. It's as if the city itself is speaking to you, whispering its secrets through these quiet, unassuming fragments. The woman watches you with a gentle smile, as if she knows exactly what you're thinking. "People always expect history to be grand," she says, her voice soft and steady. "They look for kings and battles and monuments, but the real history, it's here, in the way we baked our bread, in the debts we owed, in the lists we made, over and over again." She hands you another shard, this one covered in tightly packed script. You squint at the writing, recognizing names and numbers, dates and places. "That," she says, "is a shopping list for a wedding feast. Enough food to feed 50 people. Wine, honey, dates, roast goose, fish, bread, everything written down so nothing would be forgotten." She laughs softly, shaking her head. "You should have seen the receipts after the feast." You smile, imagining the chaos of a wedding celebration in ancient Thebes. The laughter, the music, the clatter of dishes, and somewhere in the background, someone carefully jotting down every expense on a shard of broken pottery. It's humbling in a way, a reminder that no matter how much the world changes, some things stay the same. We write lists to remember, we worry about bills, we gather to celebrate, and we record the details. Not because we think they'll matter to history, but because they matter to us, right here, right now. And here's something else to ponder. Historians still debate whether these archives were organized deliberately, or if they simply grew over time, expanding with each passing year as more and more shards were added to the pile. You glance at the towering stacks surrounding you. wondering just how many lives are represented here, how many stories are still waiting to be uncovered. The woman seems to sense your thoughts. She smiles, her eyes twinkling with quiet wisdom. Every shard has a story, she says, her voice almost a whisper. Some just take longer to tell. You leave the archive with the sense of awe, your heart a little heavier, but your mind alight with wonder. As you step back into the sunlit streets, the city feels different, more alive, more connected, as if you've glimpsed its hidden soul. And somewhere deep within you, a quiet voice whispers that maybe, just maybe, you've left your own faint trace on its history too. The streets of Thebes wrap around you like a labyrinth now. But instead of feeling lost, you move with purpose, drawn deeper into this ancient web of stories and shards. The voices of the marketplace have faded into a low hum behind you, replaced by the occasional creak of wooden doors and the rhythmic patter of footsteps on stone. You soon find yourself at the threshold of a modest home. Nothing grand, just sun-baked mud brick walls and a narrow doorway shaded by hanging reeds. Yet something about it feels inviting, as if the walls themselves are accustomed to company. Inside, the room is cool and dim, and the smell of fresh herbs fills the air. A young woman kneels by a low table, surrounded by baskets brimming with onions, garlic, lentils, and small clay jars of spices. She's busy arranging goods with a practiced hand. But what really catches your eye is the shard resting beside her, ink still fresh on its surface. She looks up, offering you a soft smile. "Keeping track," she says, lifting the shard slightly in greeting. Too easy to forget what's owed otherwise. You watch as she adds another name to the list, her reed pen dancing across the clay with elegant ease. The names seem familiar, neighbours, vendors, perhaps even friends, and next to each a small mark denoting a payment or delivery. "It's not just about money," she explains, her voice calm and steady. "It's about trust. A record keeps everyone honest." She laughs softly, her eyes twinkling with humour, and keeps me from showing up empty-handed at the baker's door. You sit down nearby, drawn in by the quiet intimacy of the scene. She hands you a shard, inviting you to take a closer look. You turn it over in your hands, feeling the rough edges and the smooth curve where the pot once held oil or wine. The writing is clear, but alongside it there's something else, tiny drawings. A little fish, a loaf of bread, a jar of honey. Visual cues, perhaps for those who couldn't read, or simply a whimsical touch. "I like to doodle," she says with a shrug. "It helps me remember, and it makes the lists a bit more cheerful." You can't help but smile at that. Even in the midst of managing household supplies, there's room for a bit of playful artistry. But beneath the charm, you sense something deeper at work here. This isn't just about food and debts, it's about survival. Every item on that shard represents a piece of daily life, a thread in the intricate tapestry of existence in this bustling city. She gestures toward a larger basket filled with shards, her expression growing thoughtful. "Some people think we're foolish for saving these," she says. "They say it's just clutter, better tossed out with the trash." Her fingers brush lightly over the collection, and her voice softens. "But I see them differently. They're reminders of good harvests, of lean years, of times when neighbours helped each other." She pulls out a particularly worn shard, its writing faded but still legible. "This one," she says, holding it up, "is from the year the river didn't flood. We all had to ration everything. It was hard, but we managed together." She smiles, a quiet pride shining in her eyes. "I keep it to remember that we survived." You sit in silence for a moment, the weight of her words settling over you like a warm, heavy blanket. There's something deeply comforting in the thought that even in the face of hardship, people find ways to endure, to adapt, to remember. And here's a curious fact. Historians still debate whether these personal shards were ever meant to be preserved long-term, or if their survival was simply a happy accident of dry desert sands and forgotten corners. You watch as she carefully adds her latest shard to the growing collection, placing it gently atop the others like a final piece in a puzzle. "It's funny," she says with a soft laugh, "to think that somewhere, far in the future, someone might find these and wonder who we were." She looks at you, her gaze steady and knowing. "Maybe they'll think we were strange, writing everything down on broken pots. Or maybe they'll understand. After all, we're not so different from anyone else." You leave her home with a strange sense of peace, the image of her sitting amidst her shards lingering in your mind. The sun has dipped lower now, casting long shadows that stretch across the streets like dark rivers. As you walk, you can't help but imagine the entire city as one vast, living archive. Each home, each shop, each quiet corner filled with fragments of lives intertwined, recorded on humble bits of clay. And you realize, with a soft, amused smile, that this city is far from forgotten. It's simply waiting for the right eyes to see it, the right heart to listen. And tonight, it seems, that heart is yours. The sky has begun its slow descent into dusk now, painting the sandstone walls in amber and rose. The city glows with a gentle, golden hush, and your footsteps carry you toward a quieter part of Thebes, where the homes grow farther apart and the air feels stiller, as if the stones themselves are holding their breath. You follow the curved path that leads away from the central city and toward a collection of humble buildings perched on a hillside. As you approach, you hear the faint sound of recitation, soft, deliberate syllables spoken aloud. The cadence is steady, like a heartbeat, and it draws you toward a small courtyard bathed in the fading light. There, seated cross-legged on woven mats, are a dozen children, some no older than 7, others edging toward adolescence. Before them stands a teacher, robed in faded linen, a reed pointer in one hand and a piece of pottery in the other. You pause just outside the threshold, captivated. Each child holds a shard, some curved from storage jars, others flat from broken dishes. The surfaces are etched with rows of hieratic script, phrases copied with trembling fingers. You watch as a boy squints at his shard, his tongue peeking from the corner of his mouth, trying his best to replicate the characters in front of him. The teacher glances your way and offers a nod of welcome, gesturing for you to enter. "Today," she says to the children, her voice soft but firm, "we practice the proverb, 'A man who learns is a man who lives twice.' Now, write." The children lean forward, reed pens in hand, dipping them into tiny clay pots of ink. The scratching sound of writing fills the air like the rustling of dry leaves, punctuated by the occasional sigh or frustrated grunt. You take a seat at the edge of the courtyard, watching the quiet determination on their faces. The pottery shards they use are no different than the ones used for shopping lists or temple notes. But here, they've become vessels for knowledge, stepping stones to literacy. You pick up a discarded shard nearby and notice faint scribbles layered beneath newer writing, evidence of many students practicing, erasing with water, and beginning again. The surface bears the ghost of lessons past. One girl looks up, noticing your interest. "That one used to be mine," she whispers with a shy smile. "I practice my father's name on it every day." You turn the shard over, and indeed, beneath the newer text, you can just make out a name repeated in tiny slanted script, dozens of times, as if the act of writing it was both learning and remembering. The teacher approaches and kneels beside you. We cannot afford papyrus for every student, she explains. So we teach on what we have. Fragments. She holds up a shard for you to see. It's smoothed nearly flat, darkened from many hands. They carry more than words, she says. They carry confidence, mistakes, progress. You look around at the children, some still hunched in fierce concentration, others beaming as they complete their lines. It strikes you how deeply these pieces of clay have shaped their world, not just as tools of record keeping, but as instruments of identity. And here's something scholars still puzzle over. How widespread was this form of education in ancient Egypt? Did only the children of scribes and artisans learn to write? Or did these modest schools, like the one before you, reach farther into the fabric of everyday life than we've assumed? As you ponder this, the teacher claps her hands once. The children look up expectantly. She points to a boy with curly hair and a confident posture. He stands and, holding his shard like a scroll, recites his copied line. He who listens becomes wise like the gods. The other children applaud, and you do too, softly so as not to disrupt the delicate calm of the courtyard. The teacher nods with quiet approval. Tomorrow, she says, we learn the names of the stars. You smile at the thought, children sitting under the night sky, learning to inscribe constellations on broken pottery, as if anchoring the cosmos to Earth one letter at a time. As the lesson ends, the children gather their shards into small satchels, handling them with care. A boy carefully wraps his piece in linen before slipping it into his pouch, as if it were something sacred. And maybe it is. Maybe learning always leaves a trace, not just in clay, but in the people we become. You rise to leave, nodding your thanks to the teacher, who bows her head gently in return. The children file past you, their laughter light and full of pride, their tiny footsteps echoing into the dusk. And as you step back into the fading light, the city seems to exhale, as if its ancient heart is soothed by the soft promise of another generation, learning to write its story, one shard at a time. The last blush of sunlight lingers along the rooftops as you continue your quiet journey through Thebes. The streets are calmer now, with most of the market stalls packed away, and the aroma of evening meals drifting through open windows. The city is settling into its nightly rhythm, but you, ever curious, feel drawn toward a more shadowed part of town, where whispered words and hidden ledgers often intertwine. Soon enough you find yourself before a house that doesn't advertise its business openly. There's no market stall, no colourful goods displayed outside. Yet people come and go from its doorway with the same cautious glance over their shoulders. You know that look anywhere. Business dealings best kept discreet. You ease your way through the entrance, greeted by the cool, dim air of a merchant's office. Inside, a man sits behind a low table, his fingers stained with ink, his eyes sharp and calculating. His robes are modest but neatly pressed, and beside him, as you might have already expected, sits a tall stack of pottery shards. He doesn't bother asking your name. He simply gestures for you to take a seat on the woven mat across from him, his gaze never leaving the shard he's currently studying. "Curious about my records?" he asks, his voice dry and clipped with the faintest edge of amusement. Everyone always is, eventually. You nod, your eyes drawn to the sheer number of shards surrounding him, each inscribed with careful lines of script, each a record of some deal or debt. "These," he says, lifting a shard with deliberate slowness, "are my livelihood. Debts owed, payments made, trades arranged. Without them, no merchant in this city could survive." You watch as he sets the shard down and picks up another, his fingers moving with practiced ease. "This one," he continues, holding it up for you to see, "records a deal for 20 sacks of barley, agreed upon during the last festival. He turns the shard over, revealing even more writing on the back. And here, he adds, is the record of a late payment, interest included, of course. You can't help but raise an eyebrow at that. He notices your expression and chuckles softly. Yes, interest. We're not so different from your world, I imagine. Business is business. You glance around the room, taking in the shelves lined with even more shards, each carefully labelled and stacked according to year, merchant, or type of transaction. It's an entire financial system built on the backs of broken pottery. But as you study the shards more closely, you begin to notice something unexpected, small marks etched alongside the writing. Symbols, animals, even little drawings of eyes or birds. The merchant follows your gaze and offers a knowing smirk. Ah, you've spotted our little code. He taps one of the symbols with his finger. Not all debts are meant for public eyes. Sometimes discretion is required. A symbol here, a drawing there. Only those who know the meaning can truly read it. He leans back, clearly enjoying your fascination. It's said that some of these marks even carried hidden curses to ward off those foolish enough to meddle. You let out a soft laugh, imagining the scene. Someone picking up a shard only to recoil in fear at the thought of unleashing a vengeful spirit. And yes, he adds, his voice lowering conspiratorially, historians still argue about the meaning of some of these symbols. Some say they're just merchant shorthand. Others, well, they whisper of secret societies, hidden networks of traders bound by oaths older than the city itself. You can't tell if he's serious or simply enjoying the theatrics of it all, but either way, the effect is spellbinding. He lifts another shard, this one larger than the others, its surface crammed with neat looping script. Here, he says, is the largest debt I ever recorded. A shipment of spices from far to the south, frankincense, cinnamon, myrrh, enough to perfume every temple in Thebes for a year. He traces the lines slowly, his expression turning thoughtful. It took 10 years to repay, but it was repaid, every last grain of spice. There's pride in his voice now, tinged with a strange kind of reverence, for the shards themselves perhaps, or for the strange binding power of promises kept and debts settled. You sit there watching as he returns the shard to its place, his movements careful, almost tender. And in that moment, it's clear. These aren't just records of business to him. They're a map of relationships, alliances, rivalries, an entire hidden history of the city, written not on walls or scrolls, but on discarded bits of clay. As you stand to leave, he offers you a final knowing glance. Be careful what you pick up in this city, he says, a playful glimmer in his eye. Some debts linger longer than others. You step back into the cool night air, the scent of frankincense lingering faintly in your memory. The streets are quiet now, but you can almost feel the weight of the merchant's words following you, trailing behind like a shadow. And as you continue walking, you can't help but wonder, how many of these innocent-looking shards scattered throughout the city still carry debts waiting to be repaid? The night deepens as you make your way through the quiet streets, the city of Thebes slipping into slumber. But your curiosity is far from satisfied. The air is cooler now, and the wind picks up a faint scent of burning oil and aged parchment. You follow it, drawn toward a building that looks far more official than the homes and shops you've visited so far. Columns rise at its entrance, their surfaces worn but still bearing traces of carved hieroglyphs. You step through the threshold into a grand hall, though grand in this case means slightly less dusty than most places, and with higher ceilings that echo your footsteps. At the far end of the hall, Seated at a long stone table covered in pottery shards is a man dressed in pristine linen robes. His head is shaved smooth, his face lined with age and long hours spent bent over ink and clay. He doesn't look up as you approach. He's too absorbed in the shard before him. You stand there quietly observing as he meticulously copies information from one shard onto another, comparing, cross-checking, and making tidy notes in the margins. Finally he speaks, his voice dry as parchment, but tinged with humour. You've been following the trail of broken pots, haven't you? You admit it with a nod. He smiles faintly and gestures to the shards spread before him. Then you've reached the heart of it. You take a step closer, your eyes widening at the sheer volume of records before him. Here, neatly stacked and categorized, are shards bearing every imaginable type of information. Census lists, labor rosters, temple inventories, and even legal rulings. These, he explains, tapping a shard with his reed pen, are the records of the temple's holdings. Every grain of barley, every measure of beer, every head of livestock accounted for. Without these, chaos would reign. You watch as he lifts a shard inscribed with dozens of tiny characters, each one denoting a person's name and the work they performed for the temple. Harvesters, scribes, weavers, guards. People think temples are only places of worship, he says, arching a brow. But they are also the engines of the city. They manage food, labour, trade, even justice. He sets the shard aside with care, picking up another. Here, he continues, is the record of a trial, a dispute between two neighbours over the boundary of their fields. You lean in, fascinated as he traces the lines of text. The details are oddly familiar. Complaints about property lines, accusations of theft, testimonies from witnesses. Some things never change, he remarks dryly, and then he lowers his voice slightly, as if sharing a secret. But not all records here are meant for public eyes. He gestures toward a locked chest at the corner of the room, its surface inlaid with copper symbols. Inside, he says, are the more sensitive matters, disputes involving high officials, temple scandals, unresolved debts too large to erase. He leans back, a shadow of a smirk on his face. Those are not for wandering visitors to see. You can't help but laugh softly, appreciating the irony. Even in ancient Egypt, bureaucracy had its secrets and locked drawers. And here's a curious fact. Historians still debate how much authority temple scribes truly wielded. Some believe they were merely record keepers, others argue they were the unseen power behind the throne, shaping the flow of goods and decisions through their control of information. You glance around the room again, seeing it now in a different light, not just as a quiet archive, but as the nerve center of a vast, intricate machine. The scribe continues his work, seemingly unfazed by your presence. He moves with a rhythm that speaks of years, perhaps decades, spent in this exact position, surrounded by the hum of clay and ink. There is a comfort in it, he says suddenly, as if reading your thoughts. To know that everything has its place. Every person, every harvest, every coin, all written down, accounted for. He lifts his gaze to meet yours, his expression calm but intense. Because memory fades, he says simply. But the shard endures. You sit with that truth for a moment, letting it sink in. It's easy to romanticize the grand monuments and towering temples of ancient Egypt, but here in this quiet room of records, you begin to understand that true power often lies in the smallest, most fragile things. As you turn to leave, he offers you one last piece of advice, his voice low and steady. If you wish to understand a city, he says, do not look to its walls or statues, look to its records. You step back into the cool night, the words echoing in your mind. The city around you feels different now, less like a collection of buildings and more like a vast living storybook. Every home, every shop, every temple is a chapter, and scattered throughout it all, like breadcrumbs leading back through time, are the shards, the humble, enduring fragments of lives once lived. And as you walk on, you can't help but wonder, how many stories are still hidden, waiting for their chance to speak? The streets of Thebes are nearly deserted now, cloaked in the soft hush of night. The stars emerge overhead, glittering like tiny jewels against the velvety sky, and the moon bathes the city in a pale, silvery glow. But your feet keep moving, drawn by the quiet heartbeat of history that still pulses through these winding alleys. Soon you find yourself standing before a modest home, its doorway framed by bundles of dried herbs and garlands of garlic, subtle signs that this is the dwelling of a healer. You hesitate for just a moment before slipping inside, the scent of crushed leaves and burning resin wrapping around you like a familiar, comforting blanket. The interior is warm and dim, illuminated by the soft flicker of oil lamps. Shelves line the walls, crammed with clay jars, bundles of dried roots, and, of course, stacks of pottery shards. The healer, a middle-aged woman with a calm, steady demeanour, looks up from her work, her hands stained with herbs and ink alike. She greets you with a small nod, motioning for you to come closer. "I suppose you're here to hear about these," she says, her voice gentle, but carrying a quiet authority. She gestures toward a pile of shards resting near her workbench, each one marked with elegant looping script. "These," she explains, lifting one and holding it up to the lamplight, "are my medicines in a way. Lists of remedies, treatments, and preparations. Each recipe passed down, tested, altered, and preserved." She hands you the shard and you read the words inscribed upon it, a list of ingredients for a soothing poultice, followed by careful instructions on preparation. "Papyrus," she says with a soft laugh. "Far too delicate for my work. Ink fades, paper burns. But clay endures, and if it breaks, I simply write the recipe again, on another shard." You watch as she selects another piece, this one larger and covered in dense script. It lists not just remedies, but symptoms and diagnoses. Fevers, coughs, swelling, all recorded in exacting detail. "I keep records of every patient," she continues, her fingers tracing the lines of text with quiet reverence. "Who they are, what they've suffered, what has helped them." Her eyes meet yours, steady and unwavering. "Because I need to remember, to see the patterns, to learn from every case." And then with a faint smile she adds, "And perhaps because we all want to leave something behind." She sets the shard down and picks up another, smaller one, this one different from the others. The writing is smaller, more hurried, almost as if it were a message dashed off in a moment of urgency. "This," she says, "is from a midwife who worked alongside me many years ago, a note she left for me during a difficult birth. It reads, 'Prepare the oil and bring more hands.'" Her voice softens and she smiles fondly. "She saved both mother and child that night. I kept this as a reminder that even in chaos, we can find grace." You sit in quiet awe, realizing that within this room, amid the herbs and oils and flickering lamps, lie stories not just of sickness and healing, but of resilience, of hope, of life itself. And here's a fascinating thing. Historians still debate the full extent of medical knowledge in ancient Egypt. Some argue it was rudimentary, based mostly on superstition. Others point to records like these, practical, detailed, and remarkably sophisticated for their time. You watch as the healer carefully files away the shards she's been working with, tucking them into woven baskets lined with soft linen cloths. "These will outlive me," she says with quiet certainty. "And perhaps one day another healer will read them, Someone yet unborn, learning from the hands of those long gone. She glances toward the doorway where the night wind stirs the hanging herbs. The city forgets many things, she says, her voice almost a whisper now. But these little pieces, they remember. As you rise to leave, she presses a small shard into your hand. A token of thanks, she says, for your listening ear. The shard is simple, its surface worn smooth by time and touch. But inscribed upon it, in careful deliberate script, is a single word. Endure. You step back out into the night, the shard cradled in your palm, its message warm against your skin. The streets are silent, save for the soft sigh of the wind as it moves through the city's ancient bones. But as you walk, you realize something wonderful. This isn't a quiet city at all. It speaks. In every fragment, every shard, every forgotten scrap of pottery tucked into a dusty corner or buried beneath the sands. And tonight, you've learned how to listen. You walk deeper into the night, the city of Thebes now cloaked in a soft, velvety quiet, interrupted only by the occasional creak of a wooden shutter or the faint bark of a distant dog. The shard in your hand feels heavier somehow, its single word, endure, echoing in your thoughts with every step. Eventually, your wandering leads you to a narrow passageway, where the scent of incense and burning oil lingers thick in the air. You follow the twisting lane until it opens into a small courtyard, where a single torch flickers beside an arched doorway. Curiosity nudges you forward. Inside, the room is dim but welcoming. Its walls lined with shelves, stacked not with food or pottery, but with something far more curious. Rows upon rows of pottery shards, each wrapped in fine linen like precious relics. At the center of it all sits an elderly man, hunched over a large flat table covered in clay fragments. He doesn't look up immediately, too absorbed in his work, carefully assembling the shards like pieces of a puzzle, fitting them together with the precision of a master artisan. When he finally does glance up, his face is marked with deep lines, but his eyes sparkle with youthful mischief. "You've been following the pottery trails," he says, his voice like sand against stone, worn but steady. "You must be quite stubborn to make it this far." He gestures to the table, inviting you to sit across from him. "This," he says, spreading his hands over the scattered shards, "is the city's hidden heartbeat, the lives most people forget to see." He picks up a large fragment, its surface covered in tightly packed script. "This one," he begins, his tone reverent, "records the names of temple workers paid in grain for their labor, men and women alike. You'll find priests here, yes, but also stonecutters, basket weavers, and even musicians." He holds your gaze as he continues. "They were all paid by the temple in measured sacks of barley and beer, a fair wage, if you were lucky enough to work under an honest overseer." He carefully places the shard back onto the table, then selects another, smaller, but no less important. "And this," he says, holding it up to the light, "is something special. A list of workers dismissed for poor conduct." You raise an eyebrow, intrigued. "Lazy labourers, thieves, those who disappeared in the night," he explains, a wry smile tugging at his lips. "Some even accused of sorcery or blasphemy." You let out a quiet laugh. "So even ancient HR had its paperwork?" He chuckles, nodding. "Oh yes, and they were thorough." But then his expression softens, growing more thoughtful as he selects yet another shard. This one worn smooth by time, its script faded but still legible. "This piece," he says, voice quiet now, "is the most precious of all." He passes it to you with surprising gentleness. You tilt it toward the flickering torchlight, and the words slowly emerge, names followed by dates and a brief note beside each. "It's a memorial," he says simply. "A record of those who died during a particularly harsh season of sickness, names carefully written by a scribe who must have known many of them." He leans back, his eyes distant. No tombs for these people, no grand inscriptions on temple walls, just this shard left to speak for them. There's a long silence as you trace the faded characters with your fingertips, feeling the weight of forgotten lives pressed into clay. "And here's the thing," he says, his voice barely above a whisper now. "Historians still debate whether records like this were meant to endure, or if they were just practical lists, discarded after use." He gives a small, sad smile. "But tell me, does this feel like something meant to be discarded?" You shake your head, the lump in your throat making it hard to answer. He nods slowly, as if satisfied by your reaction, then begins gathering the shards on his table, placing them back into their linen wrappings with the same care one might give to newborn children. "These pieces are more than broken pottery," he says softly. "They're the voices of those who couldn't afford papyrus, the ones whose stories were never carved in stone." He meets your gaze again, his eyes bright in the torchlight. "And they're still speaking." As you stand to leave, he presses a shard into your hand. "A parting gift," he says. "This one bears a simple message, written in steady, flowing script. All is remembered." You step out into the night once more, the shard warm against your palm. The streets are empty now, hushed beneath the weight of time. But as you walk, you feel them, whispers from every corner, from every wall, from every forgotten fragment of pottery resting beneath the sands. And you realize that in this city, nothing is truly forgotten. Not a loaf of bread, not a debt, not a life. All is remembered. And tonight you've become part of that memory too. The night wraps itself around you like a soft linen shroud, but you continue moving through the quiet city, the shard still clutched in your hand. The streets seem to lead you now, winding through narrow alleys and archways, drawing you deeper into the hidden folds of Thebes. Eventually you reach the outskirts of the city, where the sandstone walls give way to wide open courtyards and sprawling estates. Here the air is cooler, touched by the faint scent of flowering lotus drifting from nearby gardens. The moonlight bathes everything in silver, and ahead of you a large ornate house stands in near silence. Curiosity tugs at you once again. You slip through the outer gate and into the courtyard, where stone statues of falcons and lions watch silently from their pedestals. In the distance you see the soft glow of lamplight spilling from a side chamber. Inside, seated alone beneath a canopy of carved beams, is a man in fine linen, his hair carefully oiled and braided, his wrists adorned with gold bangles that catch the firelight. He is surrounded by servants, but none disturb him. Their tasks are quiet, their movements respectful. At his side, placed with the utmost care upon a low cedar table, are pottery shards, carefully cleaned, polished, and arranged like prized possessions. He looks up as you approach, a faint smile crossing his face. "You've come far," he says, his voice calm and rich, like honey warmed by the sun. "Few follow the trail of the shards this far." You lower yourself onto the cushion opposite him, eyeing the fragments before him. Unlike those you've seen in the markets and workshops, these are flawless, every stroke of ink preserved, every edge smoothed as though the shards themselves were polished stones. "These," he explains, gesturing toward the collection, "are not common records, they are personal." He picks up a shard delicately, almost reverently, and holds it toward you. "This one," he says, "was my father's." a record of every offering he made to the gods during his lifetime. Each loaf of bread, each jug of beer, every oil lamp lit at the temple, written down here in his own hand. You study the shard, amazed by the precision of the writing and the quiet devotion etched into every line. He believed, the man continues, that if he documented his piety, the gods would remember him after death. He smiles faintly, eyes distant. Perhaps they have. He sets it down and picks up another smaller shard, this one more worn, its script hurried and uneven. And this, he says, his voice softening, is my son's. He turns the shard so you can see it, a short note written in a child's shaky hand. I gave my mother a lotus flower today. She smiled. He chuckles softly, the sound tinged with pride. A boy's first attempt at writing. He insisted it be kept with the others. You find yourself smiling at the sweetness of it, proof that even in a house of wealth where gold gleams and statues stand tall, the simplest moments are cherished above all. And here's something intriguing. Scholars still argue whether pottery shards were ever intentionally preserved by the wealthy, or if their survival was purely accidental. Most believe the wealthy favoured papyrus scrolls, but as you sit here, watching this man handle each shard with reverence, you realise the truth might be more complicated. He gazes down at the collection with a thoughtful look. Papyrus fades, it crumbles, but pottery endures. He runs his fingers over the surface of a particularly old shard. Wealth may not last forever, but memory, that is a different kind of treasure. He leans forward slightly, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret. I have shards here with poems, he says, others with love notes, carved and scratched into the clay with the edge of a knife. He picks up another fragment and reads it aloud, his voice quiet and steady. When the river rises, I will think of your eyes. He smiles, placing it back among the others. People think only of gods and gold when they speak of Egypt. But sometimes it is the broken things that carry the most beautiful words. You sit in stillness, absorbing the weight of his words and the delicate beauty of the lives preserved in this room. He studies you for a moment longer, then selects a shard from his collection, a modest one, neither richly decorated nor particularly large. This, he says, holding it out to you, is for you. You take it, surprised by its warmth despite the night's cool air. Inscribed upon it is a simple line. In quiet hearts, history whispers. He smiles gently. Carry it well. It belongs to every wanderer who listens. You rise to leave, bowing your thanks. He inclines his head gracefully, already returning to his quiet work, surrounded by his fragments of memory. As you step back into the moonlit night, the city sprawls before you, still, calm, and alive in ways you hadn't noticed before. Every house, every courtyard, every humble market stall is a vessel of history, holding quiet stories in its walls and corners. And as you walk, you feel it, the soft, steady hum of lives long past, whispering through the shards of pottery that glimmer beneath the sands, waiting for someone like you to hear them again. The city grows quieter still as you continue along the empty streets, your newly gifted shard tucked safely in your hand. Thebes sleeps now, its lamps flickering low, its people wrapped in linen and dreams. But your steps carry you onward, deeper into the winding lanes, where shadows gather thick, and the air feels heavy with forgotten secrets. Soon you come upon a low, stone building, partially sunken into the earth, its entrance flanked by weathered statues of jackals. It's easy to overlook this place. There are no bright banners or loud voices here, but something about its silence feels inviting, almost magnetic. You push open the door and step inside. The air within is cool and dry, thick with the faint scent of old smoke and sandalwood. Rows of shelves stretch from floor to ceiling, filled not with scrolls or relics, but with pottery shards. Thousands upon thousands of them, neatly stacked, organized with a precision that borders on reverence. At the center of it all sits a solitary figure, cloaked in dark linen, their face obscured by shadows. They are hunched over a table, carefully brushing dust from a fragment of pottery, their movements slow and deliberate. Without looking up, the figure speaks, softly, their voice smooth and almost otherworldly. Welcome to the records of the forgotten. You take a step closer, your breath catching in your throat as you gaze upon the countless shards surrounding you. They are worn, some nearly crumbling, their ink faded to the faintest ghost of words. But they are here, preserved, catalogued, and waiting. These, the figure continues, finally lifting their head to meet your gaze, are the records no one else wanted to keep. Their eyes are sharp, gleaming like dark gems beneath the hood. Banished names, they explain. Criminals, exiles, those erased from temple scrolls and household records alike. When their stories were struck from papyrus, they turned instead to clay. They hold up a shard, its surface cracked but still legible. You lean in, reading the jagged script. My name was wiped from the ledger, but the gods still know me. You shiver slightly, the words sending a chill down your spine. The figure sets the shard down and gestures toward the vast collection surrounding them. Not all who were forgotten were villains, they add quietly. Some simply angered the wrong person. Others refused to pay bribes. A few were just unlucky. They offer you another shard, smaller but heavier in its weight somehow. The inscription is brief but sharp with sorrow. I remember my wife. She remembers me no more. You trace the faded letters with your fingertip, feeling the deep ache behind them. There are hundreds like it, the figure murmurs, their voice softening. Words whispered by those who vanished from the official histories. Names erased, but not lost, not here. You glance around, the enormity of it settling over you like a heavy cloak. This place, this hidden archive, is a quiet rebellion against the erasure of time. And here's something that would baffle even the most seasoned scholars. Many historians today are still unaware of sites like this, where records of the outcast and the shunned were carefully preserved away from prying eyes. To most, these shards are just fragments scattered by the winds of history. But here, they remain intact, hidden in plain sight. The figure watches you, a faint smile playing at the corners of their mouth. Sometimes, they say, the most powerful stories are the ones no one was supposed to read. They lean back slightly, their gaze never leaving yours. You've walked far tonight, they observe, their voice like silk brushing over stone. But every step you've taken, every shard you've touched, it's changed you, hasn't it? You nod slowly, unable to deny the quiet truth of it. They extend their hand, offering you yet another shard, this one wrapped in a strip of cloth, its edges worn smooth by time. This, they say, is yours now. You carefully unwrap the fragment, revealing a short inscription, written in steady, deliberate strokes. No voice is ever truly silenced. You look up, but the figure only smiles, their eyes gleaming in the dim light. Carry it well, they whisper. And remember, every story you listen to becomes part of your own. You step back into the night, the cool air brushing against your face, your heart heavy with wonder. Thebes lies before you, silent and still, but you see it differently now. You see the layers beneath its walls, the quiet hum of forgotten lives, the hidden stories etched into every stone and shard of pottery scattered beneath its sands. And as you walk, the city feels alive, whispering softly with every step you take. No voice is ever truly silenced. And tonight you're beginning to understand just how many voices are still waiting to be heard. The city seems to breathe alongside you now as you walk, its ancient pulse slow but steady beneath your feet. The streets are bathed in moonlight, quiet and empty, but you no longer feel alone. You can almost hear the faint murmur of forgotten conversations drifting through the air. Fragments of lives once lived, still lingering here, soft and persistent as the desert wind. You follow that whisper, your steps guided not by sight but by instinct, deeper into the winding lanes. Soon you arrive at the edge of the city, where the tightly packed homes give way to the gentle rise of a low hill. Scattered atop it are small crumbling buildings, simple structures almost lost to the sands. But you recognize them immediately. This is a resting place, not of the wealthy or powerful, but of artisans, builders, and scribes. A humble necropolis. The scent of earth and stone fills the air, and in the pale light, you notice something curious. In front of several of the tomb entrances, nestled carefully among the offerings of dried flowers and worn amulets, are pottery shards. Dozens of them. Some partially buried in the sand, others placed deliberately in shallow alcoves carved into the walls. You step closer and pick up a shard resting beside a modest grave marker. The inscription is faded but still clear. I worked the stone that built the temple. May I be remembered. A soft breath leaves your lips. You turn the shard over, finding another inscription. This one smaller, likely added later. We remember. You glance around and realize that every tomb here tells the same quiet story. Shards tucked carefully into crevices, each bearing a name, a trade, a small plea for remembrance. A potter's final words etched onto what was once his canvas. I shaped vessels for water, for wine, for grain. May my hands be known. A weaver's farewell, as delicate as the linen she once spun. Thread by thread, I wove for the city. May my work endure. You pause, overcome by the weight of it all, and here's something that scholars still puzzle over. While tomb inscriptions of pharaohs and nobles are well known, these humble burial shards are far rarer in the historical record, often dismissed as debris, unworthy of study. But standing here, surrounded by them, you see the truth with stark clarity. This was not random, this was ritual. A quiet tradition, known only to the common folk of Thebes, ordinary men and women leaving behind their names and their labours, scratched into clay, as a final act of defiance against forgetting. You kneel beside one of the graves, running your fingers over the smooth edge of a shard that simply reads, I was here. And that simple sentence hits harder than any elaborate inscription or golden statue ever could. Because here, in this silent field of forgotten workers, the most sacred prayer wasn't for glory or riches. It was to be remembered. As you sit in that stillness, the moon high above, you begin to hear it again. The soft hum of voices, not loud or haunting, but gentle, like a lullaby carried on the wind. The potter, the weaver, the mason, the scribe. They are all here, their voices woven into the fabric of the city, speaking softly through their shards. You gather yourself to leave, but before you go, you select a small, unmarked shard, resting near the entrance to the hill. It feels smooth in your hand, almost as if it's been waiting for you. Using the edge of a nearby stone, you scratch a single word onto its surface, listening. And you place it gently among the others, a quiet offering. As you walk away, leaving the hill behind, you feel the weight of their stories settle softly within you, no longer distant, no longer forgotten. Thebes stretches before you once more, but now it glows differently under the moonlight. You've walked its streets, read its hidden words, and now, in some quiet, indescribable way, you belong to its history too. The night grows deeper as you wander back toward the heart of the city. But Thebes doesn't feel quite so foreign to you anymore. Its streets, once winding and mysterious, now feel familiar, as if the city has welcomed you into its quiet, slumbering fold. You walk with ease, each step steady, guided by the comfort of knowing you're surrounded by countless unseen companions, the voices of those whose stories linger here still. Soon you come upon the faint flicker of torchlight ahead. The glow spills out from a wide doorway, casting dancing shadows along the street. Drawn by its gentle warmth, you approach and step inside. It's a tavern, one of the few places still awake at this late hour. Inside, the air is thick with the scent of honeyed beer and roasted chickpeas, mingling with the soft murmur of conversation. A handful of patrons linger at low wooden tables, their voices hushed but steady, sharing quiet laughter and the last sips of their evening drinks. And there, amidst the mugs and bowls and platters, you see them again. Shards of pottery scattered across the tables, some used as coasters, others held loosely in calloused hands. You settle onto a cushion in a shadowed corner, watching as an older man at a nearby table lifts a shard and squints at it in the lamplight. He chuckles to himself, then passes it to his companion, who reads it aloud with a grin. It's a crude joke, scrawled in uneven script. Something about a man who tried to sell sand by the river, clearly a punchline meant to draw laughter from those who know the absurdity of such a thing. The tavern keeper notices your interest and ambles over, wiping his hands on a linen cloth. He sets down a mug of spiced beer in front of you without asking, as if sensing that you too are a wanderer needing a place to rest. He leans on the table, his voice low and easy. "They've been telling jokes on shards like that for as long as anyone here can remember," he says, his eyes twinkling with amusement. "A bit of fun, a way to pass the time." You take a sip of the beer. It's sweet, thick, and comforting, and glance around again, noticing more shards tucked into corners, stacked near the hearth, and scattered among the patrons. "These," the tavern keeper continues, gesturing around the room, "they aren't the temple's records or the merchant's accounts. No debts here, no ledgers." He smiles, tilting his head toward the older men laughing nearby. "These are the city's laughter," he says softly. "The stories we tell after the sun goes down." He picks up a shard from behind the bar and hands it to you. It's rough, its edges chipped, but the inscription is clear, a riddle. "What has no tongue yet tells every secret?" You smile, already knowing the answer, but you read it aloud anyway. "A shard of clay." The tavern keeper laughs, the sound rich and genuine. See, they knew how to laugh at themselves too. And here's something that many historians would never guess. While much of ancient Egyptian writing has been preserved in formal serious forms, religious texts, tax records, legal decrees, there was another layer, one rarely spoken of. Shards like these, carrying jokes, riddles, even bawdy tales, fragments of humour passed from hand to hand in spaces just like this one. Some say these are the truest histories, the tavern keeper muses, refilling a patron's cup nearby. Not the grand stories carved in stone, but the ones you share over a drink, between friends, when no one else is listening. You can't help but agree. These are the moments that rarely make it into the history books, yet they carry the heartbeat of the people more vividly than any monument. As the night drifts on, you listen to the hum of voices around you, soft and low, their words curling through the air like smoke. You hear tales of stubborn donkeys, of clever wives outwitting foolish husbands, of tavern ghosts who drink more than they scare. Each story leaves behind laughter, smiles, or the quiet nods of those who've heard it before but still enjoy the telling. And somehow it all feels familiar. You glance down at your collection of shards, those you've been given tonight, each carrying its own message, and feel the weight of their stories settling within you, joining the ones shared here over mugs of beer and plates of roasted lentils. Before you leave, the tavern keeper presses one more shard into your palm. "For the road," he says with a wink. You turn it over, smiling as you read the inscription. "Even the gods laugh when the wine is good." You chuckle softly, tucking it carefully into your pouch. As you step out into the cool, quiet street once more, you glance back at the tavern, where the light still glows gently through the doorway. The laughter fades behind you, but its warmth lingers. And you realize something simple but profound. History isn't always solemn or grand. Sometimes it's just a shared joke, scratched onto clay, passed from hand to hand, leaving behind the soft echo of laughter in the night. And tonight, you've become part of that story too. The streets of Thebes are hushed now, wrapped in the deep quiet that comes just before dawn. The moon hangs heavy in the sky, its pale light casting soft shadows along the narrow alleys as you continue your journey, the laughter of the tavern still echoing faintly in your chest. But even as the city sleeps, there's one more place that seems to beckon you forward. You follow a winding path that leads away from the bustling quarters, up a small rise overlooking the city's rooftops and temple spires. Here, nestled against the hillside, stands a modest home, simple in design but well kept, with ivy creeping up its sun-baked walls and a small stone bench resting just outside its door. A faint glimmer of lamplight flickers within. You step closer, drawn by the quiet hum of activity inside. Through the open doorway, you see a man seated at a low table, surrounded by mounds of pottery shards. He isn't a merchant, a priest, or a scribe. You can tell by the worn tunic he wears, the calluses on his hands, and the gentle lines of kindness etched into his face. He looks up as you approach and smiles warmly, motioning for you to enter. "You've been walking a long path tonight," he says, his voice soft and steady, like the slow flow of the Nile itself. "Come sit. There's always room for another here." You settle beside him, your eyes immediately drawn to the shards spread across the table. They're different from the others you've seen. Some are inscribed, yes, but many bear drawings instead of words. Simple sketches, figures tending fields, women baking bread, children playing near the river, animals grazing beneath palm trees. He notices your gaze and chuckles gently. "These," he explains, picking up a shard and tracing the lines of a drawing with his thumb, "are the stories I've collected." He passes the shard to you. On it, a small scene unfolds. A man casting a fishing net into the river, his face turned toward the sun. "No one asked me to make these," the man continues, his tone tinged with quiet amusement. "I'm not a scribe nor a scholar. I'm just someone who likes to remember." He leans back slightly, his eyes thoughtful. "I gather broken pots from the streets," he says, "from the markets, the fields, the riverbanks. Anywhere I find them." He lifts another shard, this one showing a woman spinning thread beneath a tree. "And then," he says with a smile, "I draw what I've seen." You glance around the room, noticing even more of his work stacked neatly along the walls. Dozens, perhaps hundreds of shards, each bearing a fragment of daily life, lovingly captured in simple, graceful lines. And here's something most historians would never expect. While written records dominate the study of ancient Egypt, Little is ever said about those who may have recorded their world through pictures alone, especially those outside the formal temples and archives. Yet here you are, surrounded by the humble, beautiful work of a man who has done just that. He hands you another shard, a small one depicting a bustling scene at a market stall. You can almost hear the chatter of voices, the clink of copper coins, the laughter of children weaving between baskets of produce. "I can't read or write," the man admits quietly, "but I know how to see, and sometimes that's enough." You sit together in companionable silence, admiring his collection as the night slowly slips toward dawn. "This city," he says after a while, his voice soft, "is made of stories." He picks up one more shard, this one showing a lone traveller walking along a winding road, a staff in hand and the sun setting behind them. "And every story," he adds, placing the shard gently into your hand, "deserves to be remembered." You look down at the shard, feeling its weight in your palm. The rough edges, the smooth curve where it was once part of something whole. It's you, the traveller on the road. You meet his gaze and he smiles knowingly, as if he's been expecting you all along. "You've been collecting stories tonight," he says with a quiet chuckle. "Now you carry this one too." As the first pale threads of sunlight begin to stretch across the sky, you rise to leave, tucking the shard carefully into your pouch alongside the others. The man doesn't follow you to the door. He simply nods, already turning back to his work, his fingers tracing new lines onto a fresh shard. Outside, the city begins to stir, its rooftops glowing gold beneath the rising sun. And as you walk back down the hill, you realize something simple and beautiful. Not every story needs words. Some are told through laughter, through touch, through shared glances and quiet sketches scratched into clay. And tonight you've collected both kinds, the ones spoken, the ones written, and now the ones drawn. You feel their weight as you walk, not as a burden, but as a gift. The city is waking, and you, now a quiet keeper of its stories, are ready to walk into the morning light, carrying pieces of Thebes with you forever. The sun begins to rise behind the hills, casting a soft amber glow across the rooftops of Thebes. You can hear the city stretching awake, the distant bleating of goats, the rhythmic thump of grain being ground into flour, the low murmur of voices as merchants begin setting out their wares. But your journey isn't quite over. Your feet carry you, almost without thought, toward the great river that winds like a silver serpent beyond the city walls. The Nile glimmers in the dawn light, its waters smooth and calm, carrying boats that drift slowly along its surface. There, near the river's edge, you spot a small weathered shrine, half hidden beneath drooping branches of sycamore trees, its walls cracked by time but still standing firm. You approach quietly, drawn by something you can't quite name. Inside, the shrine is cool and shadowed, its walls adorned not with gold or elaborate paintings, but with simple offerings, bundles of reeds, small jars of honey, handfuls of dates placed neatly before carved stone figures of river gods. But what truly catches your eye are the shards, hundreds of them, placed in careful circles around the base of the statues, each one inscribed with words, prayers, wishes, whispered pleas. You kneel to read the nearest shard, the clay warm from the morning sun, for safe passage across the river. Another beside it reads, for healing from fever. And another still, for the return of a lost son. You sit there surrounded by these quiet, humble offerings, feeling their presence like a soft tide pulling at your heart. Soon a priestess appears, her robe simple, her hair braided with river reeds. She walks barefoot, her steps making no sound as she tends to the shrine, arranging the shards with gentle, reverent hands. She glances toward you with a serene smile, her voice like the hush of wind through the papyrus reeds. "Many come here," she says, her words slow and soothing. "Not to leave gold or silver, but to leave words." You watch as she picks up a shard, examining its message before placing it back among the others. "Some believe the river gods listen better to those who speak through clay," she continues. "The Nile carries their words downstream into the heart of the land." She kneels beside you, offering you a small shard and a reed pen. "If you wish," she says softly, "you may leave your own prayer here." You hesitate, feeling the weight of all the stories you've gathered tonight. The bakers and weavers, the scribes and healers, the forgotten names and the shared laughter. And somehow you know exactly what to write. With slow, deliberate strokes, you inscribe your message onto the shard. "For all voices to be heard." The priestess smiles as you place it gently among the others, tucking it between two shards that read, "For peace in my home. For the harvest to be kind." She looks at you with quiet understanding. "That is a prayer worthy of the river," she says. And here's something many historians still overlook. While great temples and tombs dominate the landscape, it was often the small hidden shrines like this one where ordinary people left their truest, most heartfelt words, scratched into clay, given freely to the gods, and then left behind to be carried away by the wind, the earth, or the river itself. The priestess rises, gathering a few worn shards into her hands. "Some of these have been here for generations," she says with a faint smile. "I keep them safe until they crumble back into the soil." She looks toward the rising sun, her expression calm and certain. "And even then," she adds, "the words remain, carried in the water, in the air, in the hearts of those who listen." You leave the shrine with a soft, lingering sense of peace, the sound of the river lapping gently at the shore as the city fully awakens behind you. The streets are bustling now, vendors shouting their prices, children laughing as they chase one another through the alleys, neighbours sharing gossip beneath bright awnings. And as you walk through it all, you feel the shards tucked safely within your pouch, the fragments of prayers, stories, laughter, work, and hope. You are carrying them now, not just physically, but within you. And you understand something very clearly. This city, this place, was never just about grand monuments or towering temples. It was always about the people, their hands, their words, their quiet resilience. And now with every step you take, you're carrying a piece of their world with you. And somewhere in the breeze, soft as a sigh, you swear you hear their voices whispering again. Thank you for listening. The morning sun spills across the city in full now, painting the sandstone walls in hues of gold and honey. Thebes hums with life, market stalls brimming with fresh bread and fruits, fishermen hauling their morning catch from the Nile, potters spinning clay at their wheels, their fingers coaxing new shapes from the earth. But as you wander, the city feels different somehow. Not merely busy, but alive in a deeper way, as though every corner hums with quiet stories only you can hear. You follow the flow of the streets, moving with the current of daily life. Everywhere you turn, you now spot them, those familiar pottery shards hiding in plain sight. A merchant's counter holds a stack, each one bearing notes for deliveries. A basket at a bakery brims with them, orders for bread and dates, with tiny sketches to mark which is which. A child at the corner of an alley plays with a shard, tracing lines on its surface with a stick, unaware of its hidden history. You smile to yourself, knowing now what few others seem to see. Eventually your steps lead you toward a small public square, where a large fig tree casts generous shade over a gathering of townsfolk. Beneath its branches, elders sit together on woven mats, sharing cups of beer and bowls of figs, their voices low and steady as they recount tales from their youth. You pause at the edge of the square listening. One of the elders, a woman with hair as white as river foam, holds up a pottery shard and begins to read from it aloud. Her voice is clear, rich with humour and wisdom. In the year of the great flood, we carried water in pots, but left our sorrows at the river's edge. The others chuckle softly, nodding in agreement. Another elder retrieves a shard from a cloth satchel, holding it up like a prized possession. This one, he says proudly, was my grandfather's. He kept it in his garden for luck. He reads the inscription aloud, his voice tinged with affection. May every seed I plant grow as strong as the river's pull. The group murmurs with approval, and more shards appear, passed around, admired, laughed over, treasured. You realize with quiet wonder that this isn't merely a gathering of friends. It's something more, a community of storytellers, keepers of memories, bound together by clay and ink and time. An elder gestures to you, beckoning you closer with a kind smile. You carry shards too, don't you? She asks, her eyes twinkling knowingly. Wordlessly, you draw the pieces from your pouch, the shards you've gathered through the long night, and place them carefully on the mat before her. She studies them with practiced eyes, tracing her fingers over the inscriptions and drawings. Her face softens as she recognizes the prayer you left at the riverside shrine. She looks up at you, her gaze full of warmth and quiet approval. You've listened well, she says gently. And now you've become part of this city's memory. She lifts one of your shards, holding it up to the sunlight. These pieces, she continues, are like seeds. They travel carried by hands and hearts. They plant themselves wherever they are needed, and from them stories grow. She presses the shard back into your palm, her voice soft and steady. Wherever you go, she says, remember this. You're not just a traveller anymore. You are a keeper of voices. The others nod, their smiles wide and welcoming. And here's something few scholars ever truly grasp. History isn't just carved into stone or written on scrolls. It's carried by people. Passed through laughter and tears, through simple meals shared beneath trees, through the quiet act of sharing a pottery shard beneath the morning sun. As the elders return to their stories, you rise from the mat, your heart full but light. You leave the square with a new understanding, walking slowly through the bright streets as the day fully awakens. The city stretches out before you, alive with motion and noise. But beneath it all, you hear that steady, familiar hum, soft, persistent, and warm. The shards in your pouch feel lighter now, as though they're no longer burdens but bridges, connecting you to every name, every hand, every whispered wish that shaped this place. And you know, deep within you, that wherever your journey leads next, Thebes will remain with you, not just as a place you visited, but as a part of your story, etched into you as surely as ink on clay. The sun has climbed high now, casting short shadows and bathing the streets of Thebes in its warm golden glow. Yet even as the city buzzes with the sounds of commerce, laughter, and footsteps on stone, you feel a growing sense of calm within you. You've wandered its alleys, touched its shards, listened to its hidden voices, and somehow without even realizing it, you've reached the end of your journey. Drawn by instinct more than direction, you make your way to a quiet overlook at the edge of the city. From here, the Nile winds gracefully below, glittering like silver thread. Beyond the river, the hills rise gently, soft and hazy in the mid-morning light. You sit on a smooth, sun-warmed stone, the city sprawling before you in all its ancient, enduring beauty. You take out the shards you've collected, each one bearing its story, its moment, its quiet truth. You lay them out before you, watching as the sunlight glints off their worn surfaces. The shard from the baker's shop, with its careful tally of bread and beer. The playful sketch from the tavern, capturing laughter shared after dark. The healer's steady notes, written with hope in steady hands. The drawings of the man who couldn't read, but who saw more than most. The prayer you left by the river, wishing for every voice to be heard. And the simple message from the old man under the fig tree, reminding you that stories like seeds are meant to travel. You let your fingers brush over them, one by one, the warmth of the sun mingling with the warmth of memory. And as you sit there surrounded by these fragments of clay, you realize something quiet and certain. These shards were never just objects. They were never simply broken pots or discarded waste. They are pieces of people, pieces of laughter, of labor, of longing, pieces of love, of grief, of everyday life, pieces of everything. You look out over the city, its rooftops bright under the sun, its streets alive with voices that rise and fall like the tide. And you understand, truly understand, that every corner of this place holds a story. Every step you take here connects you to thousands of others who walked these streets long before you. Some carried burdens, some carried joy, but all of them, in their own way, left something behind. A shard, a prayer, a laugh, a hope. And now you've carried them too. You gather your shards carefully, returning them to your pouch, but this time they feel different. Lighter, yes, but also fuller. As if somehow they're no longer just remnants of the past, but living things, carried forward by your hands. As you rise to leave, the breeze stirs gently, rustling through the nearby trees. The sound is soft, like a whisper, almost as if the city itself is speaking to you one last time. You pause to listen, and you hear it. Not in words, but in feeling. A quiet gratitude, a gentle farewell, a promise that, wherever you go next, you will always carry this place within you. You take one last look at the city of Thebes, its sunlight, its shadows, its timeless hum of life. Then, with a heart both peaceful and full, you turn and begin your slow walk down the hill, back toward the streets below. You do not rush, you savor every step, every breath, every lingering note of the stories that have filled your night. And as you walk, the soft whispering continues around you, fading slowly, gently, like a lullaby sung by the wind itself. It's time to rest now. Time to let the weight of the journey settle softly over you like linen sheets in the quiet dark. Let the city fade from view. Let the stories drift into the distance. Let the quiet fill your mind. And as your eyes grow heavier and your breath slows, the last thing you hear is a voice, soft, familiar, and endlessly kind, whispering, just for you. All is remembered. You're part of it now. End of script. Sweet dreams.